Thank you for staying with us. And if you're just joining, you've not missed so much. We talked about, at the first half of the program, we talked about the Kenya protest and, of course, the calls by the opposition leader for not just better standard of living in Kenya, but, of course, possibly the impeachment or the resignation of the president. And now we move a little bit away from Kenya now, and we'll move to Nigeria and maybe Africa as a whole, because what we're talking about is what is being observed by Muslims and, of course, Christians across the globe. And Muslims across the world, including Africa, are now in the second week of the holy month of Ramadan, the sacred month, which is filled with a fasting period from just before dawn until sunset. Also serves as a month of abstinence, charity, and increased act of worship. And we also speak about the Christians as well, because coincidentally, it's also a time for Christians as they're celebrating the Easter, while traditional rulers are there calling for more recognition. So it almost seems like as the Muslims are celebrating the Ramadan, the Christians are celebrating Easter. Even if this time around the Christians are going to be killing chickens, and the Muslims, this is not the time. We'll get to know more if this time around they are killing ram or not, but I think they're not killing ram this time around. And religious African traditional leaders are also calling for more recognition. But before we go further, let's quickly take a look at this report compiled by News Central Adeshewa Odushoga about Ramadan observation across the globe.
It's that time of the year when Muslims from across the world gather to welcome the holy month of Ramadan. Ramadan is the 9th month of the Islamic year, but it goes beyond just a month for Muslims. It is regarded as one of the holiest months and marked by a period of fasting from dawn to dusk and considered one of the 5 pillars of Islam.
The masjid, the mosque were, packed with a lot of people, Muslims, people that have been, disconnected for a very long time from the masjid. They don't know go to pray, but when Ramadan comes, they want to go back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this feeling is different.
When you pass in the month of Ramadan, you go to the mosque and attend tafsir, you go to your places of lectures, outside ones, outdoor lecturing and whatever, you will know and be guided.
The fasting is preceded by an obligatory congregational prayer known as Tarawih, observed at night to usher in the next day of fasting. Tarawih is significantly performed only during Ramadan from the first moon-sighted evening, indicating the start of Ramadan, to the second moon-sighted evening, indicating the last day of Ramadan.
Fasting strengthens the soul, just as eating and drinking strengthens the body. So while we are fasting, most of the people are going to be, weak, many people are not going to be as active as they would love to be, but then their souls is strengthened.
During Ramadan, Muslims take their first meal in the morning before dawn, known as Suhoor, and are expected to stay away from eating and drinking until they break their fast after sunset for the evening meal called Iftar. They are also expected to abstain from uttering vulgar and obscene statements and content, especially on the social media.
You have to desist from saying things that are not okay with your mouth, saying words that are absurd. You don't even abuse during the month of Ramadan.
You want to ensure that you do sadaqah, you do charity. You want to maximize rewards more than you ever want to do in other months.
It is also a common practice for some non-Muslims to fast during the month of Ramadan, one considered an act of solidarity. Islamic Cleric, however, has this to say.
You want the culture of some people to have to behave like that. So for them to be rewarded by what they have done, then they have to be Muslims. That is what we know, and that is what we obtain from the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
While Ramadan fasting is considered compulsory for all Muslims, Islam also exempted some categories of people, which include sick people whose health will be affected by fasting, children that haven't reached puberty, pregnant women or nursing mothers, menstruating women, the aged, and travelers. Adeshewa Odushoga reported for News Central.
Well, that was the package about the Ramadan period by Adeshewa Odushoga, and it's also the Easter period for the Christians. Now, joining us in this conversation is News Central's Adeshewa Odushoga. Thank you, Shewa, for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
We also have Bettina Onweli, who will also be joining us. Thank you, Bettina.
Thank you for having me. Blessings.
And also, we have a lecturer from the Department of History and Technology Studies, I think, who would also be joining us very shortly. His name, just a second. Okay, I think we're having issues finding his name right now. Apologies for that. But when we got that. So we have from Osun State University, Dr. Temitope Fagunwa. Thank you so much for joining us. Dr. Temitope, are you there?
A pleasure. Can I be heard?
All right. Apologies for that. We couldn't find your name on time. So anyways, we have Adeshewa Odushoga, we have Bettina, and we have Dr. Temitope Fagunwa. Adeshewa, I'd like to ask you, how has the fasting been?
Well, it's been good. Only that the weather in Nigeria is not helping matters. I mean, before you step out, the water you took in the morning is dried up,
right.
And it makes you really tired. But aside that, it's been going on well.
Well, you don't look tired. You don't look exhausted. You're glowing.
Fasting.
Maybe it's the makeup.
Is that what it does?
I'm really tired, honestly. But of course, I mean, the faith is the strength. So I'm relying on the faith. I mean, within observing, submitting to the will of Allah to fast. So that's, for me, is enough strength to carry on.
Okay, that's a beautiful one. Thank you for that. Bettina, it's almost Easter. I mean, the Good Friday, the Easter Sunday. How are you feeling?
I feel very great. I'm looking forward to not eating meat tomorrow, being the Good Friday. And of course, people are already preparing for the long holiday all through the weekend and then even on Monday. So it's something to be excited about, even though some of us will still be working, but we're not complaining. I mean, we are celebrating, our Lord. So it's all good and fine.
All right, thank you so much for that, Bettina. Now, I would like to start with Dr. Temitope for this conversation, right? So Africans are not the only ones who subscribe to the major religions. Obviously, how would you say that the teachings of Islam, Christianity, and the African traditional religion helps foster unity in Africa?
Well, if I can be heard very well, I would like to commence my intervention by saying that there is nothing like major religions, in actual fact. I think the concept of major religions is, in a way, fancy to a section of, members of the human race. Having said that, I think it is also important to state that we really do not believe in the concept of, African traditional religion. Again, there is nothing, under the surface of the planet Earth that we can point to as African traditional religion. But what we do have across the African continent and amongst members of the indigenous populations across the globe is the concept of African spirituality. When you understand spirituality, you understand the differences it has with religion. Spirituality is not the same thing with religion. So for us on the African continent, we've never had religion. We only came in contact with religion firstly in the 7th century when the Arabs from what we know as the Middle East today came into the African continent to invade the mass of the people and impose onto them Islam as a religion. That will be our first contact with the concept and the practicability behind what you can call the concept of religion. Hitherto, before the 7th century, we have nothing in our cosmological belief system that points to, religion. What we had hitherto, this period was spirituality. It is also important to state that, Islam came into Africa in the most possible manner, in the history of any society in the 7th century. Christianity, again, came into the African continent, though, specifically, you can say around the 18th century. But the basis upon which, Christianity was built on was can be traced back to the 15th century. To the 15th century when the Atlantic slavery, commenced across the African continent. So the invasions of these people, the invasions of the Arabs in the 7th century, the invasions of the Europeans in the 15th century gave birth to what you can call organized religion. but not clearly, spirituality. And again, it's important for us to note that these two religions, Islam, that Islam and Christianity that we have now, called, the major religions, came into Africa, not on the basis of any mere negotiation, really. And because they did not come into the African continent with any, ability or, medium of negotiation for the people to accept, we are struggling in pinpointing exactly what is the relevance of these religions.
Okay.
And we understand these two religions to be Abrahamic religions.
Okay. Okay. So just let me butt in there, and I understand that you're already firing up the conversation, which is quite good. But our concern here today is to more of give relevance to all these, as you said, African spirituality, while some we call it religion, but we can't take away the fact that there's so much similarities between some of these things, some of these spirituality and religion, just as you put it. Everyone has his own sacred time. I want to believe that the African traditionalists have a sacred time. They do special worships to their beliefs and whatever is sacred to them. Same thing as Muslims and as Christians. But we're talking about now we found ourselves in this whole big space, whether you're the African traditionalist, whether you're the Christian or the Muslim, and we found ourselves in one big space. And we're talking about cohesion here, and we're talking about national unity. How can these three, I'll put it as three major mode of spirituality or religion or worship come together and promote social cohesion? But before we go into that, I would like to just quickly get the reaction of Shewa and Bettina to what Dr. Fagunwa said.
All right, if you'd like me to go first, I understand that as I represent the Islam religion. I'm a Muslim, and there's no denying the fact that Islam was introduced to Africa. It wasn't something that we knew with our forefathers. It was introduced by a foreign race, and we've since come to accept it, and we've since come to start practicing this, this religion. And I understand that, and I also believe in fairness when it comes to religions, but representation. I mean, he has said that Africa does not have religion, rather we have spirituality. And yes, I would agree with him because as much as we want to represent different religions, and this is sometimes based on what we were born into as a result of the religion our parents were practicing. Of course, it's definitely not going to be the same religion our forefathers may have been practicing. So we also should, as much as possible, try to promote, equal representation, ability to live together in unity without having to claim superiority of one religion over the other. So, to a very large extent, I believe that we all are still worshipping a superior power, whether or not irrespective of who we identify the superior power to be. Muslims will say it is Allah, Christians will say it is God, and while different other spirituality in African tradition would recognize the spiritual powers to be different gods as the way each and everyone believes in it. But so we should, as much as possible, try to preach and promote fairness and equal representation of this religion, irrespective of what faith each of us belong.
Okay, Bettina, do you want to say something about that?
For one, personally, I think that Nigeria has a lot of public holidays already. Now, I understand other religions trying to say, we're also here, we want to be recognized, and that is fair. We can understand that. But let's also remember that there are still other, religions that we don't talk about often that would also come up and start saying, okay, we too, we want recognition. So when that happens, my question now is, how do we move forward? Do we give everybody the platform to say, okay, be recognized because of your religion?
Okay. Okay. Now, just to peg that somewhere, and Shewa has tried to help us understand that there are similarities between these spirituality, even though we have different belief system towards the superior being we all worship or we all listen to. But because these beings we believe in shape our decisions, shape our way of life, shape the way we even live and move around each other. It is important to know how to cohabit with each other. And that's why I'm more concerned with how do every single person represented, either the Muslim, the Christian, the traditional Africanist, how do we all live together to ensure that the nation grows from here, irrespective of the fact that this person is not feeling like, oh, we're not giving a public holiday, or we're not giving proper recognition, or we're not giving the same attention as it has been given to others. Dr. Fagunwa.
Yes, I would like to say that my intervention earlier on was going to make this point really. I think one of the problems we have in the society again is our attempt to treat, some of the issues we have today without not looking at its historical antecedents. So if I'd gone back to the 7th century, if I'd gone back to the 15th century, it is to point out that, we have to address this issue, beginning with our understanding of how the religions came about. Because when we begin to understand how the religions came about, I think we'll be able to have that absolute understanding of the relevance of tolerance. Because when you're, as a Muslim, you're able to understand that the Arabs brought in this religion and your ancestors accepted it, yes, quite all right, but, it wasn't really a religion that was, in tandem with the African social realities and conditions as at that material point in time. So you wouldn't have any problem, really, in relating with other people or relating with other members of the, African community. Same thing to the Christians. If you understand that the Europeans, brought this religion, really, not, it wasn't the making of your ancestors and all that, you'll be able to understand why, again, you have to be tolerant, to other people's belief system. But let me answer that it is true that all forms of worship inherently have their own ways of contributing to the growth and development of a society. I mean, that is not a given. You cannot exaggerate this part, particularly on the pedestal of social value system. The Abrahamic religions, for what I know, preaches the understanding of why one has got to, respect oneself, respect the society, treat other neighbors, treat members of the, your neighbors, other members of the community, teach them the same way you would want to be treated. We know all of these dynamics, and I think you cannot remove that aspect from the Abrahamic religions, Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. But the point about African spirituality is that we also, have this codification of the social value system of the people. African spirituality, be it Yoruba spirituality, be it Igbo spirituality, traditional Hausa Fulani spirituality, the Bini people, spirituality preaches nothing but the oneness of people, the oneness of individuals, and our best.
Okay, Dr. Temitope, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I would like, for clarity's sake, I would like for us to talk about the African spirituality that you refer to. Now, does it mean that, the traditional spiritual people, the traditional worshippers, if I may call it that way, do not exactly worship a certain spiritual being? Is it that they only base their religion on the moral compass and ethnicity? Because I hear you saying the Yoruba spirituality, the Igbo spirituality. So I would like for us to clarify that.
No, you see, there's out of all of these spiritualities we have on the African continent, there's a place upon which everyone converges. There's a point of convergence. And the point of convergence is the understanding of nature and appreciation of nature. And that is why you see that everything that Yoruba spirituality, has to do with is the appreciation of nature, how to take care of nature, how to worship, nature in a way, how to venerate nature, because the African ancestors understood that their continuity, their longevity is built on one thing, the appreciation and, the intandemness with nature. So African spirituality deals with this understanding, and that is the convergence point. You can be within the context of Yoruba spirituality. You can be an Obatala devotee. You can be an Oshu devotee. You can be, an Ogun devotee. But the entirety of what you would do, you will realize, is to appreciate and understand nature. So there's a point at which we all meet, and that is why what our sister said earlier on might not be totally correct. For us, we are saying that at this material point in time, whether you are in Benin, whether you are in Hausa, in the Hausa land, whether you are whatever, what you are practicing, in as much as it's not Islam, in as much as it's not Judaism, in as much as it's not Christianity, is under the emblem of African spirituality. And what you'll find out also, interestingly, is that the vast majority of those that are in the citadel of the churches and the mosques, more often than not, patronizes the devotees of this African spirituality. But you see, because we have the problem of tolerance, and that is why for the biggest of the pastors, for the biggest of the imams, they spend a greater chunk of their time castigating and condemning African spirituality and their devotees. And that's why the Nigerian state, as at this material point in time, do not even deem it necessary to understand.
Thank you, Dr. Faguwa. I see Dr. Faguwa is quite fired up, and I understand what this clamor has been for. It has been a clamor that has been ongoing for years, that African spirituality should be recognized. And of course, right now, we still have the Christianity and the Muslim majority recognized across Nigeria and even across Africa. We understand these, and of course, in the coming years, we hope that the right recognition is given to all these African spirituality, as you would call it. But Christianity, we still have a bunch of people who are Christians. We have a handful of people as well who are Muslim. What is important is tolerance and, of course, understanding of the fact that we are one, and together we need to live as one. And on that note, we want to thank Dr. Faguwa for joining us. We want to thank Bettina Nweli and, of course, Shewa Odushoga for joining us. We wish we had more time to really talk about this, because it's a very, very voluminous conversation.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us.